poetry to get into our consciousness and to work their way into our deepest vocabulary, I think. So here's a story that I've referred to in light and honor of our theme as the door between Sinai and Sinai. And you'll see what I mean as we go through the story. It's located in a part of the Talmud where we're being told about how it is that the letters are made and put into the Torah, how it is that one achieves consistency with the letters and their forms. And into this extraordinarily detailed section drops this wonderful tale of Moses on the top of Mount Sinai as he is ready to receive the Torah. Perhaps we should get to the story. What do you think? Oh, and there it is. Because we should always have at least the experience of seeing the Hebrew, if not licking it or tasting it in some way or trying to read it. There is the Hebrew in front of us, but it's not the text on which we're going to focus. Rather, we will focus on the English text and maybe make it a little bit bigger so that people can see it. Ah, yes, English, where the vowels sit next to the letters, next to the consonants, as opposed to below them. Yes, there we are. Looks like there's somebody in the waiting room. Is that the case?
Yeah, I can do that.
Ah. Well, here we go. When Moses went up to the heavens to receive the Torah, he found the Holy One, blessed be he, sitting in front of a Torah scroll and crowning certain of the letters with the pen strokes that would adorn those particular letters in every Torah for all time. Can you imagine looking at a Torah and seeing certain of the letters that are adorned with pen strokes on them? Does that come to your consciousness? Does it come into mind? Not every letter, not every single letter has pen strokes that serve as little crowns on top of the letters, but certain and only certain of the letters. A rather surprising beginning to a story, I think. When Moses went up to the heavens to receive the Torah, he found the Holy One, blessed be he, sitting in front of a Torah scroll and crowning certain of the letters with pen strokes that would adorn those particular letters in every Torah for all time. Wonder of wonders. God has invited Moses to come to the top of Mount Sinai, there to receive the Torah, to take it down to the people of Israel. Moses has met the mark on the proper day, at the proper hour, with the people all crowding around the mountain, straining and craning their necks up towards the top of the mountain. Moses has arrived just at the right moment, but God, as it were, is not ready. Can you imagine? And what is God about? What is God doing? He's adorning the letters with pen strokes here and here and here. Ah, this is beautiful. Ah, these three crown the letter in a particular way. This one, well, why this letter has three and this letter has one? God does not explain it. And in fact, here's another wonder to consider. The letters are pronounced exactly the same way, whether they have pen strokes on them or not. Question then becomes, was the Torah complete before the pen strokes were attached to the letters or not? As we imagine spreading out a Torah scroll in front of us and taking the talit and touching it to the scroll and looking at those letters that have pen strokes on them, that seems to be the authentic Torah. But if the pen strokes were not there, it would be exactly the same Torah, or would it? Well, here's another interesting fact of the matter. There are some cultures and some traditions where there are no pen strokes on top of the letters. Yeah, Hunter. Hunter? Oh, you're muted.
Am I unmuted now?
You're good now.
Okay, I was thinking that with the pen strokes, the Torah becomes even more beautiful. And there's an aesthetic that when you look at the Torah scrolls is a wonder. The Torah would still be the Torah, but the added beauty, the heart.
There is something extraordinarily beautiful about it. And these various traditions of how to crown the Torah and how close those pen strokes can be to each other. Whether Torah actually needs it or not is the aesthetic to see it more beautiful with the pen strokes or without the pen strokes, or pen strokes that are closer than others. I remember a particularly beautiful Torah in Statesville, North Carolina, where I went to fill in as a weekend, as a rabbi for a weekend. I got a call from, it was then the rabbi at Beth Meyer, Abe Schoen, Alav HaShalom, who said, I have a good friend who lives in Statesville, and he's asked if I can put together some rabbis to come for various weekends because they are without rabbinical students and they have some bar mitzvahs coming up and they need some rabbis. So I volunteered to go for a weekend, and I found myself on a Shabbos morning with young Ariel at my side, who wanted to come with me for the weekend, opening up, spreading out this beautiful Torah scroll that had pen strokes on top, had crowns on top of the letters that were of very distinct beauty. They looked almost like peacock feathers. Some of them were so close together. It was a very, very fan-like, beautiful Torah, and one that had not been fixed and one that had not been attended to in a very long time. It was of Civil War vintage, this Torah. And I'm sure that it hadn't been touched since the beginning of the 20th century, when they had their one and only one rabbi, who was the father of Henrietta Zold, a rabbi who went from Statesville up to Baltimore, where he continued and ended a distinguished rabbinic career. Anyway, this was a very, very beautiful, beautiful Torah. But without those crowns, it would have been a Torah correct in all of the letters, but not correct in the beauty of the tradition that had formed it, Hunter. And I think that's right. It is. It hurts the eyes for us to see a Torah that doesn't have the proper pen strokes on it. When Moses went up to the heavens to receive the Torah, he found the Holy One, blessed be he, sitting in front of the Torah scroll and crowning certain of the letters with pen strokes that would adorn those particular letters in every Torah for all time. And there is no variation in which letters get the pen strokes. Moses said, Master of the world, who is it who is delaying you? In other words, I'm here at the right hour. I'm here at the right time. And you're drang around making little doodles on doodads on top of Torah letters that mean the same thing and stand for the same words and communicate the same meaning, whether the letters are there or not. Don't you have a graduate student who could be doing this for you? Why is it that you're taking my time and your time, having invited me to come up here now, and I'm watching you do this? And God responded, oh, there is a man who will be in the future many generations from now. Akiva ben Yosef is his name. he will in the future find meaning, not only in every word and letter of the Torah, but he will even derive mounds of meaning from which letters are adorned and which letters are not. This, my friends, is what happens once the Torah becomes a closed system, once it becomes a canon, once the pen is lifted for the last time from the Torah and it admits to no other changes, no addition. Lo tosif alav v'lo tigra mimenu. You shall not add to it and you shall not diminish from it. It is what it is, and it contains everything. And if you want to learn something of the everything, you will derive it from the Torah that is in front of you. But the Torah that is in front of you will not change. And here in the future, there will be this man, Akiva, and he will find meaning not only in every word and letter of the Torah, but he will even derive mounds of meaning from which letters are adorned and which letters are not. Everything is laden with the possibility of meaning and the promise of interpretation. And the words can barely contain, if they can contain at all, the meaning of the Torah. Well, what's coming to mind? What are you thinking about when you read this or hear this paragraph, the beginning of this story? Has God purposely delayed so that Moses will see him, will see God putting the crowns on top of the letters?
This is Rabbi Akiva,
Yes, it is Rabbi Akiva.
the one.
Certainly telegraphing ahead that there will be Akiba. Is God looking forwards to Akiba's explanations because God knows them and wants to hear Akiba say them? Or maybe is it possible that God is ready to be surprised by whatever it is that Akiba and his generation is going to find? What do you think?
Well, I find it rather interesting. It's almost like a dialectic. On the one hand, the Torah is now closed, fixed. On the other hand, God seems to be making it pretty clear that people will continue to interpret it. And one man in particular, Rabbi Akiva, will create some of the greatest interpretations of it.
Yes, as the Torah becomes closed, Susan, it becomes open in a different way. This is the great dialectic. This is the great paradox. The words will never change. And if I could use one example of a biblical book, not in the Torah, but in the canon altogether, the Song of Songs. If the Song of Songs was once upon a time erotic poetry, or if there was an argument of which Akiba was at the center, actually. If it was once upon a time erotic poetry, once it becomes part of the Bible, the words will never change and it will never be read as erotic poetry again, if it once was. Because it can't be part of the Bible and be erotic poetry, apparently. It must be that the simple meaning is actually the interpreted meaning. Very interesting and very complicated. What do you think, anybody else, about the question of whether God is eagerly anticipating this? Is the God of this story, as you read it, a God who is looking forward to what Akiba has to say because God dearly wants to know what those meanings are? Or because God already knows what those meanings are and wants to hear Akiba say them? Or is there some other choice in the matter?
Rabbi, if you'll permit a numerical digression, Akiba ben Yosef equals 391, which equals Yehoshua, who is in the immediate line of succession and transmittal of Torah. So maybe that's a hint that Akiba is as close to Moshe as Yehoshua is, just a disciple in a different context.
Uh-huh. A disciple in a different context, but in some ways just a breath away from leadership, just like Yehoshua would be. How interesting. The numerical heartbeat is the same in both of those names. I love it. Anything else?
When I think about that, I think about when I was doing a painting class, and the teacher would say, you have to sign your name. That's the last thing that you do. And somehow making those marks on it, it feels like it's ending. It's putting the final touches on it, and then it goes out into the world, and you let go of it. It's other people can say or do or feel whatever it is about it that you're kind of letting go. And in a sense, I think of this in the same way, is God is making these finishing touches and then letting it go and putting it out into the world.
That's very lovely. Torah as the child of the poet, as my friend Rivka Miriam would say. The poem is the child of the poet. The poet gives birth to the poem, and then the poem is out there in the world, and it is no longer mine to control. I am the author with a capital A, and I no longer have authority at exactly the same time. My authority stands second now to yours. It's a very interesting concept. And it allows us to see a God who is willing to be surprised. Ah, you don't understand, Moses. Akiva, there'll be this man in the future, Akiva ben Yosef being his name. He will derive nouns of meaning, not only from the letters and the words and all of their juxtaposition and the entire field of inquiry that mostly you and I would consider, but even that stuff which rises silently above the line, which affects no pronunciation, which affects no basic meaning of a word, very much affects the meaning of meaning, or will for Akiba. It will be Rorschach. It will be Bible text as Rorschach. Yeah, Lori.
I'm wondering, so there are a couple of things I'm thinking of. So first of all, visually, you can look at some of those strokes and see sort of a sign pointing towards that black fire on white fire. You're getting a visual of that, pointing in the direction of that as a concept. And also, God here is talking about someone who in the future is going to interpret the written word. And so that's an indication to me of oral Torah and written Torah. And I don't know how much of that is the conversation in Midrash and Talmud between God and Moses about whether we're receiving this written document or whether we're receiving both written and oral Torah at the same time.
Well, I guess that's really that will be for another time for us, really. How about oral Torah and written Torah? And which one has primacy, really? Or do they both come at exactly the same time? These are extraordinary questions. Can you even have a written Torah without an oral Torah? That is to say, without some kind of explanation of what it is that is going on in that written text, would it even make sense to us? Or must there be some kind of oral equivalency? In any event, it's clear to us, and thank you for the image of white fire and black fire, which is an ancient image, actually, that then is capitalized upon in Kabbalistic circles. You can just see flames flickering up and out, wild and incoherent, but with a kind of studied, beautiful cosmic center to it that is where everything is in order and rises outward and beyond. And some of it's white and some of it's black, and it is a perfect complement one to the other. Each the black and the white maintaining the form of the opposite one. And these flickery flames that of crowns that are going up are giving us that image, that fiery image.
Steve
And
Harold
here's
had
a-
a question.
Yeah, Harold.
Oh yeah, no, I was wondering if playing with this that maybe these little pen strokes are like if somebody scattered breadcrumbs in the forest that seemed to be going in a line, and you wouldn't necessarily know they were taking you anywhere in particular, but at least there might be the suggestion that you're being asked to follow and find something, and that you're being engaged in some way in something. And whether or not there's a specific meaning that Akiva is going to find, or even if he'll be right in what he finds, that God is saying, look, I want to engage you. I'm throwing out some breadcrumbs. See if you can what you find. The game is afoot.
The game is afoot. See what you can find. There is divine presence in the activity itself. There is yearning, a grasp that is beyond your reach, I suppose you might say, to kind of take the poet. A grasp that is beyond your reach. By the way, there are no interpretations of the crowns on top of the letters attributed to Akiva that I know of. So it's not like this story is responding to some big tradition, to some ancient tradition in which there are lots of Akiva interpretations of why these letters are, as it were, weighted, or why these words are buoyed up by these crowns or held up above by these crowns. What I translated as crowning the letters in the original, in the Hebrew, is tying crowns to the letters, as though the crowns, these strokes are filled with helium and they're holding the letters up, perhaps. But such is not exactly the image. In any event, they either have meaning or they suggest the meaningful search for meaning. These are strokes of genius, pun intended. They are strokes of genius. The game is afoot. And speaking of afoot, my hero Yehuda Amichai wrote a poem in which he commented almost haiku-like about the footprints of little birds that are visible on the sand in the morning. The one never sees the one who makes the footprints. Perhaps they're God. Perhaps they're made by God. But there are, three little things here and three little things here, and they're in some kind of pattern, and who knows? The game is afoot.
Steve, it seems like this story is sort of almost a graduate level. Like we haven't even, like Moses is just walking up. He's just taking this trek up the mountain and waiting to get the Torah. He hasn't even seen it yet. He hasn't seen the first copy of it. And yet here he is seeing God, but not only ready to hand it to him, but he's doing all the illustrations and everything. I just wonder, where does Moses learn it for the first time so that he can get on to Akiva's interpretations or why those crowns might be there?
I'm going to need a 1099 before I give any money.
Understood. Yeah, good question. We have no idea. Is Moses actually? But this is where it becomes important to make your own movie version of the story, I think. Sabina.
It was a wonderful story. I just kind of think about what's in between Moses being down with the children of Israel and God up here, and this, like, hey God, I'm here. What are you doing? And sort of what happened in between him arriving in the conversation. It's like they're old friends, and yet I think they've only spoken, didn't God introduce himself for the first time at the burning bush, and maybe while they were crossing the sea, but otherwise they haven't had too many conversations, I don't think.
Right, right.
It just
Well-
following up on what Sibby
Yeah.
said, it's as if this is God is working on something that's unfinished and Moses is encountering that. It's as if, and God knows that other messengers will find other meaning.
Mhm.
In particular one, and I was trying to think, is God hopeful in this case, or is it just that God can see all time?
Well, to put it in your language, Steve, it's like, here's this whole symphony that God is producing, but Moses hasn't even learned the basic, the tune, the basic, what do you call it? The
melody.
melody
music
for
writing, yeah,
for the
that's
for
it.
the symphony, but God's got all of the all the instrumentation and all the crescendos and everything, and Moses saying, wait, I haven't even learned the tune yet. Can you sing that again?
Well, riffing off what you're saying, Sibi, and taking a Bob Gutman's picture of a mountain somewhere in that desert. It's like Moses said a long walk. It's a hot day. He gets there on time, and he says, "Oh, you're not even done yet." And God kind of says, "Well, you don't know the beginning of not done yet. Several generations from now, this won't be done. I'm giving you this thing, but it's not done. It's not supposed to be done. That's the wrong idea to start with. You're probably not ready to get this thing if you don't understand that."
Cool.
Okay, that's really
I like that.
and that's a lovely way to move the story forward a little bit, because now Moses has this impulse to ask. Perhaps this is the reason why God set up the entire scene. If we are imagining a God who sets up the entire scene, Moses said, master of the world, show him to me. Here is Akiba who really wants to, Moses, who really wants to see this phenomenon of an interpreter. He really wants to see Akiba. Not done yet. It's supposed to be done and finished and shown to me and given to me. And now you're telling me you're already looking past me into the far-flung future to someone else. Show him to me. I really want to see him. And God said, turn around. Moses did so. And he found himself sitting in the 8th row of Rabbi Akiva's students. Moses did not understand anything that they were saying, and he became depressed. But when they arrived at a particular matter, Rabbi Akiva's students said to him, Rabbi, how do you derive this? He said to them, there was a law given to Moses on Sinai. At this, Moses' mind was settled. And here is scene 2 of our story. A scene of emotion. Moses' eagerness, Moses' depression. A scene of transport and elation. Moses transported to the classroom of Rabbi Akiva. But sitting in the last row, in the 8th row of the Palestinian Beit Midrash, there, the 8th row is the row, that's where the rank amateurs, that's where the beginners are sitting. And all of this talk going on all around him, but Moses did not understand anything that they were saying, and he became depressed. And then elated again, because when pressed to the heart of a particular matter, what's beneath the derivations that Akiva is exploring? He said to them, there was a law given to Moses on Sinai, and then Moses felt better. Well, what do we make of this extraordinary second chapter with all of its movement, literal and figurative? Space travel. David.
I think it's a beautiful reconciliation in Moses' mind of the roles of him as a prophet who was given Torah and Akiba as the scholar who has to derive it with logic and with imaginative forays, into all kinds of directions. And there's something beautiful. I think Moses now appreciates they both have an essential role and they can each appreciate the other as Akiba appreciates Moses. But there's something beautiful how Moses can now appreciate himself. He's back there in the 8th row, and with the beginning students, as Akiba was at one time in his life, and now he realizes he's part, as Akiba is, of something wonderful, and they really are yaktav. They really are together in this.
They really are together in this enterprise. Yeah, Moses as the prophet who receives the truth because it is the truth, and the role of his imagination. Well, Moses has a language, he has a vocabulary, he has expansiveness, he has depth. Jeremiah doesn't sound like Isaiah, who doesn't sound like Hosea, who doesn't sound like Zechariah. And in the world of the biblical canon, or imagining where it is that biblical material comes from, people who have studied understand, they know the difference between the kind of word and lyric phrase of Jeremiah and that of Isaiah and Hosea and so on. So the prophet does have imagination, but not quite the halachic imagination. He does not derive. He is not the scholar who derives, and Akiba is. And maybe they do appreciate each other more. Akiba appreciates Moses certainly and venerates him. And Moses is learning to appreciate Akiba. And they are there looking at each other. In my movie version, they're looking through each other. They're not seeing each other. And Moses has no substance. It's not like the student sitting next to him is poking him in the shoulder with his elbow saying, wow, isn't the master wonderful? Because Akiba is Moses is in effect not there. I wonder sometimes whether Akiba and Moses are looking in each other's direction, but not seeing anything other than a vague shadow, a presence, a shadow of presence, a hint of presence past or of presence future. Moses has a bit of an ego, doesn't he? Moses did not understand anything they were saying, and he became depressed. Halash da'ate. Became depressed, ill, almost ill to the point of expiring. Why? What do you make of him becoming depressed? What do you make of him not understanding? Why does he not understand, Deborah?
Does depressed in this place mean lost?
Oh, that's interesting. Say more about that speculation. That's lovely.
Well, I mean, I think thinking about being depressed is oftentimes that you're like lost in this mire of ideas and feelings and places you haven't traveled or haven't comfortably traveled. And I was just wondering how the rabbis actually describe depression, and if we're, because of our modern the presence of depression in modern society.
Thank you.
Does it become something different?
Yeah, thanks so much, because I think you're right. Depression for us means something clinical, and it might mean frustration for Moses. It might mean frustration in this case. There's a world of ideas, a world and a world of ideas. And Moses doesn't really understand the ideas. What's the premise that is at the very top layer of the derivation? Are we trying to decide whether nuclear power is kosher or whether you can have surrogate motherhood or turn on an electric light on Shabbos or some other thing that Moses just simply doesn't understand? Not the premise, not the predicate, not the promise of it, not the derivation of it, and certainly not the divinity of it. And how is it related to anything that Moses even imagines is going to have to do with the Torah? And even though Moses hasn't received the Torah, there are parts of it that he seems to already know about. He already knows, for example, I think I mentioned it last time, he already knows about Shabbat because they've come into the wilderness and there they are collecting manna 6 days a week. And on the sixth day, they collect manna enough for the seventh day because the seventh day is Shabbat. And no one raises a hand and says, excuse me, what's a Shabbat? So Moses seems to know about it and everybody else does too. So is it really, Stacy, is it confusion? Is that really what's going on here? Is he so confused and so tied up in knots that it's ridiculous for him to try to pierce this? And
Maybe he's thinking that even generations from now, if they can't get it in a way that he can understand, then how much more so is he going to go down the mountain and try to explain it to these people? If Akiba had generations to figure it out, and he doesn't understand anything they're saying, maybe he's thinking nobody's going to get this. This is just too hard.
That's extraordinary, Sabina. Thank you. What's he going to feel like? Is this a burden for him? And is he up to the burden of taking the promise of this kind of Torah yet to come down the mountain? Or is he ready to let be what is in his day and let the questions come as they will come? But now he has some notion of what the questions will be in the future. And is that something to which he is, I don't know, is he up for it?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And yet
It's the same Torah.
it's the same
It's the same Torah.
It is the same Torah. And as soon as he hears this is Torah mi Sinai, this is Torah that God gave to Moses on Sinai, Moses' mind was settled. Okay, there is some relation between that Torah and this Torah. And he turned around and came before the Holy One and said, Master of the world, you have a man such as this, and you give the Torah through me? Shtuk, says God. Silence. This is how it has come up in my plan. This is how it has arisen in my mind. Moses said, you have shown me his Torah, show me his reward. God said to him, turn around. Somehow Moses has returned through time and space to Mount Sinai. And there he is standing in the divine presence once again. And God again directs him, turn around. And he turned around and saw the Romans weighing out Akiba's flesh in the meat market after Akiba had been tortured and martyred by them. Moses protested, Master of the world, this is Torah, and this is its reward. And God replied, Shtuk, silence. This is how it has come up in my plan. And there the curtain comes down on the story. A strange ending to a story. What do you think?
stoke. We can't say anything. We're just going to be students of the plan.
We can't say anything. We are to be students of the plan. It does not mean that we do not, it does not mean that we are without hope or expectation. And Moses here resists God's decisions with several equations that have always stood him in good stead and continue to stand his descendants in good stead. One of them is the assumption that that practice and intelligence yields success. You have a man such as this, and you give the Torah through me. Silence. It doesn't always work out the way you think. The second equation, that piety and learning equals long life and a happy and sweet, well-seasoned ending. Doesn't always work that way. And the answer to that one also, silence. There are some things about which we might be able to raise all kinds of questions, but we don't necessarily get answers. And it doesn't mean we should stop asking the questions, because we still have to do our homework and we still have to put on our seatbelts.
It seems to me that God has put something in place and then it unfolds. And once he's put it in place, it's like, it's just going to come. There are certain things that are just going to come about because they're just going to unfold from the beginning, you know, and it's almost kind of like a hands-off is how it reads.
It's such a tease in a way. Well, Akiva may well be able to explain a few things, or he may give a spin on something that allows us a better grasp of it, or allows us to suck a little bit of the sweetness out of what otherwise seems to be bitter for us. He may be able to give us a spin on something that will allow us to grasp firmer. But ultimately, the answer is silence. Everything that we are doing against a backdrop of something that we try to understand, but ultimately don't penetrate. Moses has a little bit of spine to him here, doesn't he? To raise these questions and to receive such a rebuke, such an answer from God. Silence. Silence. Shtok. Kach ala b'machshava. This is how it has come up in my consciousness. I call this story, for the purpose of our moving towards Shavuot and moving through the doorways once again and across thresholds, as the door between Sinai and Sinai, because I wanted to, at this point, call your attention to the fact that we have moved from the Sinai of Exodus chapter 19 to the Sinai of centuries later, which is to say the Sinai of Akiba. The Sinai of Moses is the great mountain. The Sinai of Akiba is the Beit Midrash. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah. The Torah comes forth from Zion. It comes from the Zion, the Tzion that is, well, you know, neither Sinai nor Tzion are on Mount Sinai. Yeah, neither the Beit Midrash nor Tzion are Mount Sinai. Yeah.
They're both on your movie set.
Well, they are.
So
They
you
are.
interpret them how you see it.
Yeah, yeah. But the Sinai of Moses is indeed the mountain Mamash, and the Sinai of Akiba is the Beit Midrash. Moses on his Sinai goes up and receives, and Akiba derives. Giselle, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you, Rabbi. I was thinking while you were talking about the relationship in between this story and Shavuot, and I was thinking about the counting of the Omer, that we count up, although we should be counting down from 50 to like the end, and the end should be Shavuot. And this reminds me that it seems like we count up because Shavuot is not really the end, is the plan yet to come, like the story is saying. It's the end of the counting, but the beginning of the plan, that we don't know what's the plan. So I was, thinking about.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a very nice little drasha on why we count in one direction and not in another direction. One year, maybe we should try counting in both directions and see what it yields to the consciousness. David Weaver, I saw that your hand was up, and then somebody else also, I think. But David, go to you.
Yeah, this is Ariel has a question.
Yes.
Hi.
Hey, Ariel, I recognize you.
Oh, that's so nice. Well, I was thinking about how for Moses, well, I was thinking about the doorways and about how for Moses, this moment is like a doorway between the past and the future, in that his own life is written in the Torah, and he's about to receive a book that contains his life. So it's like this weird moment where he could like read ahead and see what's going to happen. And so in receiving it, he's standing in this odd moment between like a past that he knows and a future that he doesn't know, but is also being given to him by God, already written.
Wow.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
thanks for that tension. I never appreciated it. I never appreciated it like that before. The burden, and Sabina introduced the theme, I think, before, the burden that he brings with him back down the mountain. What does he look like? What does he feel like when he descends that mountain in our movie version of the story after this story has unfolded at the top of the mountain? It's a dangerous business being in this doorway between the past and the future. There's some interesting stories and insights into the last little bit of the Torah narrative, where 8 sentences from the end of the Torah, the voice and texture of the text changes, and Moses is eulogized in a certain way and spoken of in the past tense. And sages from most ancient times have recognized it and asked the question, did Moses write the story of his own death? Did he write the last 8 sentences of the Torah? Or were they written perhaps by someone else? Perhaps by Joshua, who picks up after him. And there is a prevailing voice that says, no, Moses wrote them, but he wrote them with a tear in his eye. It gets a little bit at the tension, Ariel, and the drama that you're very much suggesting here.
Bernie and Shari.
Thank you for that. Yeah, Bernie and Shari.
Hi. So I'm thinking about Moses saying, "Show me the reward," both of my going through this effort of bringing this Torah down, and also Akiba, and thinking about how when you mentioned about Shavuot and the 2 different Sinais, the focus that this reward is in that person's lifetime, right? But they obviously have an impact, and this ties to what Giselle was saying, well beyond their lifetime as the Torah is passed down from generation to generation, and we imagine ourselves receiving it, and we in fact ourselves interpret it in a way. So we don't really know what the impact of what they're doing is yet. That unfolds both in the moment that they're in, as well as we move down through the generations to the current moment. And so how do we know? I'm struggling with this God saying silence, this is how it has come up in my plan, that we may have these particularly challenging, painful moments in time. And what's the result of that? How do we individually and collectively behave differently and evolve through time?
Right. How much do we shape the interpretation, and how much are we shaped by the interpretation of someone else, like Akiba? Is there truth into which we grow, into which our watery consciousness is spilled, so that it takes a particular form and not another? Yeah, it's wondrous. The enchaining that you're creating for us, Shari, is something that'll carry us all the way through to Shavuot and beyond. Harold, Susan, somebody, unmute.
Unmute.
Sorry, that's his fault.
Yes, it's my fault.
And it always is. Anyway, I've been picturing it all along as a like a flow chart. You know, to give it to Moses, and you know, if Moses does this, then you can go down, and this will happen. Give it to Moses, and if he doesn't do this, then something else happens. And so Moses is in it, and he's got his part to play, and that'll cause things to go in a certain direction. Then Akiba gets it, and again, it follows down and flows to the next person. So I think this kind of ties up what the past few people have been saying. You're not going to get the reward yourself. It's just going to enable things to continue. If you don't do what you're supposed to, then a whole different scenario. It's like that movie Sliding Doors. Your actions will lead to what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, an unfolding Torah that is has yet to be spoken fully. Yeah, and needs people who will read who will interpret the uninterpretable, or interpret the crowns on top of the letters, in order to have a Torah that is more fully realized.
Right.
Yeah.
Stephanie is
Waving.
Yes.
waving.
She doesn't know how to do the hand. Let me unmute. I don't know why it bothers me so much. Like, I felt in the beginning paragraph that God was delaying because he kind of wanted companionship. Like, he wanted to delay parting with it, and he was adorning it, and to reach out for companionship with man when he was giving the Torah. And then at the end, it's like he just cuts Moses off like silence, like the dialogue can't go any further. And I don't know, it just was sort of, it jarred me. And I don't know what to make of it, to be honest.
Yeah, well,
End
thank
of
you.
it.
Thank you for that. And it's probably a good note upon which to close. How far can we take the dialogue? Are there parts of the dialogue that are the parts that we just simply can't penetrate? Take it as far as we can take it, as far as human reason and human imagination can take it. And then we can take it up above the line, like those strokes that are silent and impenetrable, and wait for somebody like Akiva to bring something else down for us, or for him to do all of his labor in the letters beneath the strokes, and for all of us to do the best that we can in order to give meaning to all of those strokes strokes and letters and spellings and words and gaps and phrases and sentences and paragraphs and creative juxtapositions in a text that cannot be moved and cannot be changed. And everything that must be learned from it will now be derived and not received from up above again. But still in all, is there a place where the dialogue comes to an end and where we just have to say, Kach ala b'machshava? Does everybody say it? That's how it is, after all. And there's nothing that we can do to change that, labor as we might. Well, we're going to bring a close to this. From one Sinai to the next. So we are clearly living in the world of Rabbi Akiva's Sinai, and we'll learn more about his Sinai next time, and more about, well, how the letters respond, as it were, to Rabbi Akiva. And we will we'll take the story closer and closer to the mountain. So thanks, everybody, and a continued good journey towards Shavuot. Carry your Torah with you and your letters and your words, and we'll do more next time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes,